Friends, today we shall be discussing another very important topic dealing with historical mythology that I have titled it as Causation in History. Actually, this is the title given by Carr way back in 1960s. But in today's lecture, I shall be unfolding some of the advances which have been made upon what Carr had to say in 1960s. So, since then, the many complexities have arisen, many new trends have developed. So, we are taking into account summarily all those kind of things which go into which can be considered as causation in history. One of the most important metaphysical issues is causation in history, is that historians, that is the problem which historians face. So, most professional historians, they hardly talk about the nature of causation. Now, we have passed into that stage where most of the historians would like to avoid this topic. They take it for granted, assume that this is, causation is taken for granted. Even right from school time up to, university level, we always read what were the causes of First World War. So, so they say that, look here, this is not very important, but this is important. Causation is important. I would like to remind you of one of the in the early passages, Carr says that suppose you are going to boil milk, you will put it on fire, in a pan on fire. So it will take one certain time when it will start boiling. So what causes that boiling? That is important. I will take another example. For example, when Newton was witnessing the fall of apple, that bothered him. It was a natural thing, they were, up till Newton's time, they were thinking that this is a natural thing. But it was Newton who decided to look into the reasons behind it. What could be the cause? What caused this fall? Then ultimately he discovered that it is the gravitational pull of the earth which brings it down. Otherwise, it could have gone anywhere. Therefore, history deals with events and causation relations existing between events. If event A occurs, then the event B occurs, and it can be reasonably demonstrated that event A explains the subsequent, that is sequential, occurrence of event B. No, this happened, so this happened. That is the thing. So, now the question arises how to explain the determining nature of this relationship. Many philosophers have dealt with this question. So, two would come immediately to our mind is Benedetto Croce, way back in 1866, 1952 was his period, and R.G. Collingwood, who wrote Idea of History. They were philosophers of history. They questioned the extreme relevance of causality for historians. Extreme relevance of causality. Both suggested that all history is the history of thought. It's not causes, it's a history of thought which is important. So, the ideological explanation that is important. This, however, does not lead us to think that causation has no role in history. It does not entitle us to think in those terms. On the contrary, what we find is that implies that the primary task of the historian is to find the thought involved behind that action, involved behind that particular action. There must be some thought, but that is not primary. Primary is something else. So, it suggests that even it itself is secondary, as I was telling, to a priori form of knowledge that is ideational, that is relating or produced by ideas in the mind of historian and agent. Ideas come after. So, the mere thought behind these actions and events serve as causation. Carl Gustav Hempel, his period is 20th century. He was born in 1905, died in 1997. He was a German philosopher, and he argued that there are certain covering laws. Covering laws means those which explains most of the things in a universal manner. So, that explain particular action or groups of action or events. Thus, causations deals with two groups, two kinds of things. One group we can identify as idealists. The classic example of this school would be, or this group would be, William J. Drey, 1921-2009, and Alan Donegan, 1925-1991. And the other group is positivists. Since day one, we are dealing with these positivists. The most prominent person dealing with this theme is Patrick Gardiner and Clayton Roberts, who wrote that famous book, The Logic of Historical Explanation. The very title suggests what kind of logic he is trying to seek. So, in a discussion on causal relations, it becomes very significant for a historian to first, determine what appears to be and what is. Appears to be could be misleading, but what is very important. So, David Hume, the great philosopher, Scottish philosopher and historian, he once observed in judging the nature of causal relationship that one has to find our perceptions of the patterns of connection, relation, etc. So, Hume argued that passions rather than reason govern human behaviors. Passion is important, that is primary. So, it is impossible to know, if you subscribe to their ideas, Hume's ideas, that through observing the real nature of determining forces could be located. Therefore, consulting the evidence becomes very important. And when we are consulting an evidence, it should be looked into a particular social context. This problem can be solved. By looking in this way, you can solve this problem. If agrarian unrest is taking place in the 17th century, then we will have to understand that agrarian crisis in that particular age, not from our present day, experience. So, this is how a historian can understand causal connections and its constituents, which is, in a way, central feature of historical explanation. Now, historical explanation, when we are trying to, explain the historical event, that demands that historians, first discover the real causes of the events and the processes involved in it, which is found in past through inferences. On this, I have already spoken, so I won't be dilating upon this. And we had said that historical imagination has certain, checks on them, which I suggested that it should be, the phrase could be controlled speculation. You can't go wild, otherwise history will go wild. And here we are, So, E.H. Carr, who wrote that very thin but very, meaningful book, What is History? And in that book, he has tried to deal with this question. He was not only a British historian, he was a diplomat also, and he had a pretty long life. I quote from him when he is dealing with this causation theory in one of his chapters, and he says, the causes determine his interpretation of historical process. His means the historians, historical process, and his interpretation determines his selection and marshalling of facts which will reveal the causes. So, therefore, he is always saying that you will have to make a hierarchy of causes, relative significance of one cause or set of causes or of another. That is the essence of interpretation. Which, cause you think, according to your finding, should be given precedence over which cause. So, there should be a hierarchy of causes. Remember that he was also telling us that we should always have a hierarchy of facts. Similarly, if you want to interpret a problem, you will have to make a hierarchy of hierarchy of causes. Only then you can have a better idea of interpretation. In that way, Carr's argument is that a study of history is a study of causes and facts, and I have put in bracket, you will see a circular study of causes and facts. They will keep on moving in a circular manner before you. So, you will have to pick and fix the point which should be given primacy over which. So, first duty of the historian was to find events, then try to explain them by establishing a hierarchy of several possible causes. There can't be a single cause. Then try to establish a hierarchy which will imply a pattern of relationships between the facts as events. So, the second task would be that he will have to distinguish long term and immediate causes behind an event. When we discuss First World War, so there are immediate causes, there are causes which were there for a long time. So, this is how he is also saying that he suggests that this could be done by interplaying and creating a historical narrative. Thus, Carr touches a problem of understanding the role of necessity in causes and effects. It should be essential feature of your narrative. So, thus we find that historians in general, they are rejecting David Hume's skepticism, doubtful, prescriptions, and his inability to know the real causes. So, the historians prefer to seek out those forces that necessitates subsequent events which are taking place after that particular event. So, this is called sufficient causality. The empiricist's theory of causation recognizes its enormously complex nature. They are they are well within their rights to say like this, that there are enormous amount of facts, events and other things from which you will have to select and recognize them and select them. So, this task becomes a very complex task. So, it is founded Foursquare. Foursquare is a location based social networking platform on the presumed existence of objectivity, derived and knowable facts, knowable within quotes, only through which we can find the causes. By this I mean that you will have to have a very strong foundation on which you will start selecting facts and events, and then you will try to look for what could be called knowable facts. They might not be very apparent, but you will have to look for them. For example, this is a classic example given by Alan Munslow in his book. So, I prefer this to avoid any kind of confusion or misgivings. There are many assassinations which have taken place in all over the globe. Most of the political leaders face this kind of tragedy. This is their professional hazard, but I take this example for illustrating our argument. Abraham Lincoln, the great man, he was born in 1809 and died, assassinated in 1865. He didn't die. In 1863, America was, by that time, American politicians, leaders and intellectuals, they were all worried about the existence of slavery even in the 19th century. Whereas it has been declared illegal in most of the countries, but America still had. So, the famous 1863 Emancipation Proclamation, he declared that slaves are free. So, in other words, he freed the slaves and pressured the border states, because it was a federal state. So, border states too outlaw slavery in their provinces also. On April 14, 1865, now we will look at the causes. So, he was attending a play at Ford's Theatre to relax with his wife, that is agent intentionality. So, some Americans did not like Lincoln's anti-slavery stance, because after Robert Fogel's works, we are, and Angersman work, we are now, through the application of counterfactual history, tools, it has been established that slavery was a very profitable institution. It was not just exploitation of slaves; it was actually creating the capitalistic relations. So, those people I am talking about, some Americans, or not all Americans, Americans were very gaga about it. So, some Americans, that vested interest of Americans, they were against this Lincoln's anti-slavery stance. So, they held a grudge against Lincoln. Grudge is very human nature, a covering law or historical determination, you might say, of some kind. And a handgun was used to kill him. So, the handguns could kill any people for that matter. This is a mechanistic physics of nature. So, the question arises, any of these facts could be regarded as the primary cause of Lincoln's assassination. It could be, his proclamation. It could be his asking the provinces to outlaw slavery. It could be the angst against this measure of some Americans. So, there could be variety of causes. Therefore, which cause should be considered as the primary cause for Lincoln's assassination, or was there any cause from other list? Therefore, a cause is adequate if the effect or consequence always follow that cause. Here, Lincoln was shot at point blank range, which was sufficient to kill someone. Now, sufficient cause is usually separated or distinguished from the necessary causes. A cause is necessary if its effect would otherwise have been absent. The assassin had not been in the theater. Had assassin not been in the theater, they would have not, Lincoln could have escaped his assassination. The question arises that since this event did take place, so where is the question of absence of assassin? Therefore, most historians' explanations depend on sorting out what are necessary, what are sufficient causes, and what hierarchy exists among what may turn out to be the chain of causes. So, friends, I would stop here for some time, and in my next lecture, I will introduce you to how to pose counterfactual questions.